So I'm Achia Kohn-Tavor from the Gesh Tourist Archaeology. Okay, let's go into the synagogue, okay? But you need background for that. Now, synagogues, we know the first century. Now, the first century here is major, right? We're looking for when we're looking for Jesus, this is the thing. And can you locate the first century synagogue in Chorazin in which Jesus preached? Because you have nowhere in the world besides Temple Mount that you can show historical Jesus. In Capernaum, you don't have first century exposed, not a synagogue definitely. Can you in Chorazin? Besides that, we don't have the synagogue. Magdala did they visit Magdala? Maybe, we have no record of that, okay? So we know we came here, walked that trail, came into the village. We can imagine how the village looked like back then, and looking for the synagogue. Now, the first century synagogue, by now, like it's new, because when I was in the first degree, my bachelor degrees, we didn't know how a first century synagogue looked like. Since then, we excavated about 10 synagogues, so we know how it looks. Major is Magdala, which everybody knows. It's square, it's got columns in the center, and it's got benches around, and it's not directed to Jerusalem. And got usually a room to the side of it. And in Magdala, you've got this stone. We don't have this Magdala stone in Chorazin yet. But do we have a first century? Let's begin with that. Zev Yavinu excavated here said no, there is no other architecture former to this synagogue. This is the first synagogue in Chorazin, but that doesn't make sense because we know that there was a synagogue in Chorazin like in the other place. To begin with, the first excavations here, like by 1926, the whole floor here was exposed. Okay? And when he came in the 60s and the 80s, the only thing that he had to excavate was beneath the floor, which didn't preserve. Like the stones you're sitting at, the last remains of the stone, there's a few other stones there. So he dug a few corners here beneath the floor and said, listen, there's nothing here. Now, since he died, for instance, in Arbel, we excavated in Arbel, we have 5 synagogues, a sequence of 5 synagogues, one above the other. Maybe even beginning in 2nd century BC. Okay? And Churbat Hamam, same, synagogue above synagogue. And you see that this is a pattern, that people don't move the synagogue in the location of the village. It doesn't make sense because this is a place of a synagogue and other places people live, okay? So this is what happens in Arbel and Churbat Hamam, whatever. And we expect the same thing to be here because, again, parallels. We're looking for patterns. So we re-excavated the places he didn't excavate. And we found just beneath our feet here that tons of first century pottery and coins.
Good.
Like Herodian oil lamps and...
First century CE or BC?
Both. I can send you pictures, of course, and everything.
And your conclusion was?
And, okay, but pottery doesn't prove that it's a synagogue, right? But around us in like 30, 50 meters radius, we've got about 10 different architectural items of exactly what you see, again, parallels in Magdala, in Gamla, in Jerusalem of the 1st century.
Of parallels of synagogues, like lintels and stuff?
Capitals, columns and stuff. Okay? And we've got frescoes also, which is also typical for the 1st century. So if you have pottery, coins and artifacts from a 1st century synagogue, here we must assume that the former synagogue, the 1st century synagogue, which are obviously was in use even much later, was destroyed to build the house we're standing in now. And imagine that Christian group that comes here, and I'm taking them to the mikveh, to the house, and to the wine press, and coming into the synagogue, and telling them this is a synagogue, but it's 400 years later than Jesus. So I was a bit disappointed, right? But then I take them out, and I show them, see this, you see it's different. You see this is Ionic, this is Doric, this is what you see in Magdala and so on. This stone heard Jesus preaching.
What a lovely way to put it.
And it is. And this is the only stone in the world that you can say that about it. Can you pinpoint historical Jesus in any other site in the world? Either Galilee or Jerusalem. Jerusalem is messed up. Okay? It's a synagogue, it's Galilee, it's Chorazin, he preached here, they didn't accept him. As this is the only stone that you can, those 10 stones that I show you, is the only stones in the world that you can say that Jesus, they heard Jesus preaching. This is intense. This is the best. Yes. So underneath our feet there was the first century synagogue, which apparently was used until around 400, because then they built this. How do I know? Because we found coins. By the way, we are very fortunate though that people in the 4th, 5th century had this habit of dumping huge amounts of coins beneath the floor of the synagogue when they built it. Why? Good question, but basically we call it foundation deposits. Okay? In the Iron Age we have a bowl and an oil lamp that they put beneath a wall. Very common. Tel Rehov that I excavated with Professor Mazar, you have a bowl and an oil lamp. Okay, that's the foundation deposit. In synagogues, Jews only, not Christians, they dump lots of coins beneath the floor. So we've got hundreds and thousands of coins here. In Kfar Nachum, they have 30,000 coins, something like that, beneath the floor. And the latest coin beneath our floor, beneath the floor here, is 398. So this synagogue is dated to 398. Short time after, they had to renovate it. I don't know if it was destroyed, I don't know why, but they took most of it down and rebuilt it. Initially the stairs was very much alike the ones in Capernaum, and in the second stage they moved it the way it's now, open to they took down the house and moved it. They moved the stairs and opened the yard before it, and they built this. Now this is the typical Galilean synagogue. Again, how do we know? Because of parallels. Because in 1905, two German architects, Kohl and Watzinger, came to Galilee looking for ancient synagogues. They were architects, and they came to those villages. The place of the name of the place was Khirbet Karaza. Chorazin, Karaza makes sense. And they saw the capitals, the columns sitting here, and they exposed it with other 10 synagogues, Bar'am and Meron and El-Kanatir and so on, and they defined how does a Talmudic era, late Roman Talmudic era synagogue looks like in Galilee. Again, parallels. This is the Galilean synagogue as they describe it, and we know from there, it's got typical classical architecture. Stone decorations, very massive. It's built to be shown from the outside rather from the inside. Capitals, columns, architraves, stone decorations. Unlike churches and synagogue in later period, which mainly had inside decorations and mosaics, and the entrance in churches and later synagogues were on the other side from Jerusalem. Okay, you always enter, like in synagogues today, you always enter from the other side. Say, if you are in Galilee, you'd enter from the north, and the ark would be facing Jerusalem. That means like you've actually following the scales of holiness from the daily life village to the courtyard, to the narthex, the entrance, to the nave, to the ark or altar, and to heaven. It's like a scale of holiness that you follow as an ordinary person. Whereas in Galilean synagogues, the entrance faces Jerusalem, which means that you enter, then you turn around and pray towards Jerusalem. The specific Galilean synagogues built in there's a dispute when they're first built, I'm not going into it, but say 300, 400 CE, synagogues only in Galilee are built with the entrances facing Jerusalem. They've got the basilica, they've got 3 columns, 3 rows of columns, 3 doors, just like a basilica, but the entrance is facing Jerusalem rather than the ark. Okay? So you say, where's the ark? Where was the ark? Can't put it in the entrance, right? Doesn't make sense. So if I connect it to what Rina says about the Magdala stone, I can definitely presume that in the first stages they didn't have an ark here. How do I know? Because, for instance, there's a very similar synagogue to this in El-Kanatir and Kshatot, which is very famous because it was reconstructed. There you have the entrance moved a bit to the side, and more or less in the center you've got the ark. Okay? They already had the conception of an ark facing Jerusalem, so they moved this door a bit. Here they left the door in the center. So I believe that they did introduce an ark a bit later because we found the pieces of the ark scattered around, which must have been a bit sideways, maybe a bit later introduced. So we have this piece of the ark. This is the left side of the ark, okay? And Deckel found a zigzag pattern just like this, a piece of the other side of it. This is a copy, the original. By the way, the original is in museum, Israel Museum. When you enter the Israel Museum, you've got pieces from this synagogue.
Yes.
When you go into the room of synagogues and churches, you've got pieces from Chorazin, because these are beautiful pieces. And so we can buy this, you combine it with Magdala, with El-Kanatir, we can describe a process of Galilean synagogues from the first temple into the 4th, 5th and onwards. And it's got some modifications to it as they go. One thing that Christians are very interested about is this stone that you're asking about.
After.
The one with the inscription. First, let's put it, there's a dedication inscription on it, because if you're a member of the community, you donate to the community, this specific person is, it says, Dachir Latav Yodan Bar Ben Ishmael, and so on. Remember for wealth or for good, Yodan, son of Ishmael, who donated, and so on, because he puts his money to the community. In this way he gets to decide. Okay? It's not democracy. It's, if you pay money, you also get to be the deciding, like, local disputes in who's marrying who and so on. This is how it works in the Greek-Roman world. Same here. But this is definitely a decorated piece, and it's a seat, which automatically throws us to the seat of Moses mentioned in the Gospels. And it says, Jesus says that you shouldn't sit in the east, which means in the front seat, and you shouldn't sit in the seat of Moses, like the Pharisees who talk too much and do less, okay? And this is the seat of Moses. This is what he's talking about. This is the seat of the dignified people in the community. It's not allowed to sit on it. He says you should behave accordingly to your status in the community. Look, okay, we were talking about Chorazin and Kfar Nahum, right? The decorations, which are very similar. Like the rounded cornice there is just the same type as you'd see in Capernaum synagogue. Limestone, basalt, whatever. The same idea. Now, it's not the same decoration. They have Corinthian capitals in it, Ionic capitals, but basically the idea follows. And Benny Arubas and Rina Talgam again, they wrote an article about how is it possible that in Capernaum, the only place in the world, only village in the world, that you have both a church and a synagogue right one by the other, okay? And it's a very good article, worthwhile reading. It's available both in Hebrew and in English. Not going into it, but basically, Benny told me that he wanted to have both synagogues in the same article, but they told him, listen, it's too big. So he just mentioned Chorazin in a footnote. But the same idea here, very similar synagogues. And the decorations here, there are a few types to it. So the few renovations in the synagogues. I mean, some pieces do not go with the others. Now, chiseling is very hard work, and you have to be very precise, because if you chip the wrong piece of that capital, you need to make a new one. And now, basalt is much, much harder. It's a very hard volcanic rock, and I so much appreciate the people that chiseled these artifacts, and this is so exquisite. This is the finest synagogue built in basalt. And so, I mean, you see the pieces here, we'll see more around. I'll show you later. Very, very well done. And the amount of work they put in it, the amount of money, sweat and tears and blood they put in this synagogue is so amazing. And for me, I mean, it's a village. Why would you need? It's a building standing to, what, 18 meters high? 2 stories, gallery around. It's a huge building, and you have to chisel all this thing. How do you finance that? I mean, some of it you build yourselves, but you need the artisans to come. You have to pay them. You're not in the field. You're working here. This is amazing. Like, this house is so prominent around this vicinity. It's not like the Second Temple moderate building. This is big. Many synagogues will have a mosaic. In the center of the mosaic, you have the zodiac. In the center of the zodiac, you have Helios, god of sun, in a synagogue. So many articles and so many words and so many people have written about this. And here we don't have a mosaic, not preserved at least, but we do have, and I'll show you later, we have Medusa and Hercules. And now people come here, definitely if they're Jews, but the Christians the same, and they come here and I ask them, listen, is that a synagogue? So I tell them, okay, this is how a synagogue looks, because we know got parallels, we call once again so and so. Does that feel to you like a proper synagogue? And say, listen, this is Greek, this is like a temple. This is not like what a Jewish synagogue should look like. And then usually we go through the Hercules and Medusa. And Medusa and Hercules, this is not a synagogue. You're bullshitting us. Sorry. Whatever. Yeah, they don't say this, but they're polite enough.
They do.
They give me that look. Listen. So, we have to reconcile this. Okay? First, Medusa and Hercules and the god of sun in the 4th, 5th century were not gods. Medusa was a monster, not a god to begin with. Okay? Nobody worshipped Medusa in Chorazin or whatever. This is part of a culture. Building with Greek columns is part of the classical world, and they live in this classical world. And if you are inconvenient with Medusa in the synagogue, they weren't. Are they wrong? Or maybe you can think otherwise about yourself or your culture. Because you perceive a synagogue in a certain way, okay?
Yes.
You perceive a synagogue in a certain way. You perceive a synagogue with Jewish elements, with a Star of David, with a menorah, with no Greek elements. They had Greek elements in the synagogue, and they thought it's fine. Not just this synagogue, many other synagogues. That means that your perception about, ancient Judaism should be changed. Where and what and why, I don't know. That's yours to decide. But I give you the data and you do whatever you like with it. But I learned something when I came here about ancient Judaism. This is facts.
Good.
Take it whatever you like. This is facts. But you can look at Christianity today. How many Christianities are they? How many Judaisms are they? Is it okay? It's what you think is okay or not, but you can't decide for everybody, definitely if they're not 1600 years old. What I'm looking for, what I'm interested in, is the story of people. And the story of people, whether they are today, very interesting, 1,000 years ago, 2,000 years ago, very, very interesting. I'm interested in the people that are behind the pottery and the decorations and whatever, because those artifacts are telling me a story, which my duty is to interpret it and deliver it to the world. And the best, I do it, articles and research and stuff, which is all nice, get the academical name or whatever. But I really believe that people should come here and actually experience this, whether by walking around it or by actually excavating, the best way to connect to history. And the last thing, you can walk with a tour guide in Jerusalem, whatever, and talk about the temple or whatever. But when you go and dig yourself, this is like a plug into history, and this is my privilege here.
Thanks for joining us today. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and sign up for our digital newsletter so that you can stay up to date on everything from the world of biblical archaeology. And if you would like to see more, why not check out one of the videos on your screen right now?